Joining me this next hour is one of the most controversial and best-selling conspiracy authors, David Icke. Joining me all the way from the UK, he's here to talk about what's going on in the world around us right now as we enter a new paradigm, one filled with many different possibilities. And I am just so thankful that he's here. Thank you, David, for joining me. Welcome.
Hillary.
Did we lose him?
I lost you.
Oh, you lost me. Well, I'm here, and I can hear you.
I'm back again now, though.
Okay, great. Welcome so much. So what's going on in the world? I just love to hear your thoughts. There's been so much change since you've last been on. And, there's been elections here in the States, and I know you have quite a bit to say about the new presidency here, and I'm quite interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, well, what's happened in America, and not just America, because I've been to other countries recently, India, South Africa, etc. There's been a mass mind control coup on the minds of enormous numbers of people called Barack Obama. You see, one of the things that kind of has really got me head shaking in the last few months and weeks is to see significant numbers of people who have come to an understanding of how the political system is rigged, how the two political parties in America, as in Britain and elsewhere, are actually masks on the same face, how they are funded by the same people and manipulated by the same people to a common agenda, which is a centralized Orwellian global state with a world government, world central bank, world army, microchip population, and a single global currency, which will be electronic, not cash. And yet, because of the hype surrounding Obama, they've suddenly taken on this fantasy that even though all that's true and they accept it, this guy is different, and that somehow a person of truly independent mind and integrity has been funded to the presidency by record funding in American history, great swathes of it from Wall Street sources and other sources, because he said, and he said many things that actually are sleights of hand or blatantly untrue, that he has not taken money from lobby groups. No, but he's taken vast amounts of money from law firms that represent lobby groups. So please, this is me you're talking to, Barack. And what we're looking at here is a presidential version, Hillary, of this technique that I've been talking about for goodness knows how many years, what I call problem, reaction, solution. This is the technique, for those who haven't heard me talk about it before, whereby you want to change the society, you want to change something, and you know that if you announced it openly, you get a massive anti-reaction from the public. So you don't announce it openly. First of all, you create a problem covertly, terrorist bomb, economic collapse, whatever. You then, through an unquestioning mainstream media, tell the people what you want them to believe, both about the problem and the cause of it, and either the events or the people that are behind it, which isn't true. They're just fake stories. You want the people at stage 2 then to be frightened, to be horrified, to be angry, and you want them to say, basically, something must be done. What are they going to do about it? At which point you then offer the solution in changes in legislation and other actions that change society openly to solve the, quote, problems that you have yourself covertly created. So if we take this to the Bush-Obama situation, Bush was brought in just as a front man. I mean, I don't think anyone, do they, in their right mind, believes he was running America, to create massive problems. And that's what's happened. Military problems, foreign wars, and, of course, this enormous financial collapse, the worst of which we've not even begun to see, because I've likened this economic situation to controlled demolition of a building where the charges go off. In other words, you see there's a problem, but for some reason the building seems not to move for a split second and then collapses. Well, we're in that split second in terms of the economic situation, and it's all planned and it's all engineered. So all those big problems were created by the Bush administration. And what happened? People were outraged. They're fearful. Of course they are, with the economic situation and all the rest of it. And now along comes the solution, Barack Obama. And, you know, when you are faced with big problems, you become open to solutions that you would have rejected and protested about before. And this man, with a smiling face, with the strings attached, the people like Rahm Emanuel, he's White House Chief of Staff, and all these other people, particularly a guy called Zbigniew Brzezinski, who's been his mentor for years, and indeed decades. And if you read Brzezinski's books, going right back to the late 1960s, 1970, up to the present day, he writing about an Orwellian state that's coming, in which an elite would control the population, not least through massive surveillance. And he's been talking in more recent books, I think one in 2004, about the need for a compulsory community service for all young people in America. And, hey presto, stands back in amazement, that's a key part of Barack Obama's policy. These policies are straight off the books of Brzezinski's, off the pages of Brzezinski's books. And Brzezinski, it's ironic, you know, there's so many ironies surrounding Barack Obama. He's going to send, he says, vastly more troops into Afghanistan to fight the Taliban. Well, how ironic that his mentor was the man who started it all, and he's openly admitted it. In a few years ago, in Paris magazine, he was interviewed, Brzezinski, his former National Security Advisor Jimmy Carter and co-founder of this notorious group that all conspiracy researchers write about, called the Trilateral Commission. He was the co-founder, Brzezinski, of that with David Rockefeller. Well, when he was National Security Advisor to Carter in the late 1970s, he, as he told this Paris magazine, wanted to give the Soviet Union, quote, their Vietnam. So what he did was start to organize, fund, and train resistance fighters, what today would be called terrorists, to fight and undermine the government of Afghanistan in Kabul, which was a satellite government of the Soviet Union. Brzezinski made it very plain that this is what he was doing, because he wanted to get the Soviet Union to invade to protect their government in Kabul. This he got them to do, which he seems to be very proud about, except that it cost 1 million Afghan lives. And those fighters that he funded and trained to start with became known then as the Mujahideen, and later the Taliban. And during that Mujahideen-Taliban period, the American and British military intelligence, brought a man called Osama bin Laden out of Saudi Arabia to be the front man of the, quote, resistance to the Soviet occupation. When the Soviets left, then the rest is history. And those that created those groups in Afghanistan and put Osama bin Laden there, then started turning the tables and saying they're all terrorists, we've got to do this, we've got to do that to stop them. So the man who created the situation in Afghanistan today is actually the mentor of the man who says we've got to send more troops in to sort it out. And that's just one example. There are endless contradictions and ironies surrounding Obama. He is just another political opportunist spawned by one of the most corrupt political systems in the world in Chicago. And he has had close contact and funding and support from some deeply, deeply corrupt people there. And we're looking at a fantasy, Hillary, when we see a man who's peering over the horizon with a halo around his head, who's going to change everything.
Yeah. Do you think that no matter who won, because it was always odd to me that McCain brought in Sarah Palin, which just didn't make much sense, and it just didn't fit quite with me. It just seemed like he was kind of doing that in some way to sabotage that aspect of the race. And so I was one of those kind of swept up in the whole, oh my gosh, it's going to change everything. And I found myself personally very swept up into that. And I read an article, in fact, it was on your website, about the similarities between his speeches and the uses of hypnosis, which I'm very familiar with. I'm not, certified in hypnosis, but I understand the principles of hypnosis, and the amount of similarities between the mass hypnosis techniques that are used and written right into his speeches was just eye-opening for me. So after I read that and I began to step back, I could kind of feel, the veils, the clouds kind of clear for me. And I was able to see, maybe this is, and so what it feels to me is exactly what you just talked about. And of course, when I talk about this to anybody, just even the idea slightly that, this may not be as clear cut and hopeful as it looks, I just get all kinds of reactions. I get looked at like I have 5 heads. So what do you think is, how swept off our feet have we really been by him? I live in the States, so I see my whole country really just have been fallen to the floor and throwing, big, huge, wonderful parties that he's been elected. And it really is just a little amazing to watch the whole phenomena work. Do you think he's aware that he's been put into this position, or do you think he has good intentions of coming into this position, but the people behind the scenes are using him?
No, this man's well aware. Well aware. I mean, he has a record in Chicago, a horrific record of supporting deeply corrupt people. He is a man who supported a man called Tony Rezko, a deeply, deeply corrupt man who's now in jail for fraud. And in Chicago, in Illinois, they have an organization. It's a cross-party organization called, it's known to researchers as the Illinois Combine. And they stitch up Illinois and Chicago. And Rezko was involved in that. And Barack Obama is a product of that network. And Rezko was given contracts to run public housing through his private company, and given millions and millions of dollars of public money to do so, and allowed those buildings to go into such appalling states of repair, which ironically poor black people in that area in Chicago were suffering enormously from, to the point where sewage was coming up through the kitchen sink. Some of them had to be pulled down. He also set up a network, Rezko, where he was so connected to those that ran Chicago and that Illinois Combine that he actually went to businesses and demanded money for them to have access to the people that gave out the contracts for the Chicago City Authority. And he's in jail for all that stuff now. Now, this is not a man who Barack Obama met on a corner once at a cocktail party. This man was fundamentally connected to him for years. There's so many of these stories surrounding him, but they've been kept quiet. He has been sold to the people so he can sell back to the people the solutions to the problems that have been coldly engineered. And he's going to be selling or promoting fundamental Orwellian changes in society as community coming together, community service, and all this stuff. You see, George Bush and Dick Cheney were so blatant warmongers, there's no way they were going to sell a draft. But this guy could do it to large numbers of people. And he's got a honeymoon period, which will probably be longer than most. And I think with the forces behind him are going to use that to push through a lot of change very quickly. This thing about change, we want change. Saying you stand for change in politics is, to borrow a phrase, the last refuge of the scoundrel. They all do it. They're doing it in Britain now. And for what reason? Because the system that these people represent has invariably, at any point, got vast numbers of people who are not happy with their status quo. They're not happy with their lives. They're not happy with what's happening in their country. So anyone who comes along and says, I stand for change, immediately there is prick up. If you go back to when Bill Clinton, another used car salesman, was running for president in the 90s, he was repeating the same mantra: I stand for change, we need change, and all the rest of it. But none of them, and most specifically Obama, have never, through that entire election campaign, specified what they mean by change, what they mean by hope, what they mean by something to believe in. And that's for a very good reason. What they did with Obama was create a blank screen, in effect, by using these vacuous, meaningless, without specific terms of hope, change, and something to believe in, so that he had not at any point to be specific about what he meant by that, because once you're specific, loads of people go, oh, if that's what you mean by that, no, don't want that. So you don't be specific. You just stay with the vacuous theme. And what that does, and did, is create a blank screen on which the people you're targeting project upon you their version, their personal version of what those words mean to them. So what that does, Hillary, in this mass manipulation of psychological manipulation, is it makes him all things to all people. And this is how they do it. And then they get in, and then you start to see the specifics, and you go, oh, hold on a minute, I didn't vote for this. Oh, yes, you did. That was the idea. And, the next 4 years, I've got a great friend in South Africa. He's a Zulu shaman called Credo Mutwa, and he saw Obama. This is a man who's as black as black gets, he's in his 80s now, and he should be welcoming what's happened, but of course he's an intelligent man, so color to him is just the color of your skin. It's the color of your character that he's interested in. And he looked at a television clip of Obama speaking to the mass audience, and he wrote a poem which people can get on my website, davidicke.com, which actually caught Obama absolutely right on in terms of what he is and what his agenda is and what the agenda of those behind him is. And when you have a man, who says, I'm against war, we want peace, and he can sit there with his mouth shut through weeks of the most mass, horrific slaughter of the innocent in Israel and say nothing, and then say, oh, no, we one president at a time. Well, when the bombings happened in Mumbai, India, he was out of the trap as if a gun had been fired to condemn it and what had happened, but not what happened in Israel. And this man is a vacuous pawn of a deeply, deeply corrupt network, and that's going to be obvious eventually. But to those that are caught in the headlights of the oncoming car in the Obama mind operation, it's going to take some time for that to filter down and be accepted.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned Israel, so let's go there for a moment. What are your thoughts on what's happening in that part of the world?
Oh, well, I've researched this for lots of years in great detail. Israel is not the land of the Jews. It's the land of the Rothschild dynasty. They created it. They organized the, if you like, settlement of it by Jewish people out of Europe and America. They own the government. They actually paid for the parliament building to be built with lots of Illuminati ritual imagery in it, including a pyramid and all-seeing eye, as you see on the dollar bill. And they have used that as their personal fiefdom. In fact, there's an Israeli researcher called Barry Chamish, who at the time of the last Lebanon conflict with Israel, actually talked to a Rothschild, a member of the Rothschild family, who had rejected the family's agenda, living in America now. And he said openly, he said, that my family owned Israel. And so once you realize that, and you realize the Rothschilds are a major, major force behind this network, pushing the world to a globalized fascist state, then you start to realize that all that you see on the television with regard to Israel is not what actually is happening. During the period of the First World War, the Palestinians in that part of the world were told by the British government that if they supported the battle to remove the Ottoman Empire, the Turks, from that land, then they would be given independence after the war. And this battle, of course, was made famous by a man called T.E. Lawrence, who became known as Lawrence of Arabia. We see him in the movie. I think Omar Sharif played him or something. That must have been an accurate portrayal then. And after the war, instead of giving them independence, the British took over the place under what was called a British Mandate from the League of Nations, the first attempt to create a United Nations we have today. And then through the 40s and up to 1948, vast numbers of Jewish people out of Europe and America started pouring into Israel, all orchestrated by the Rothschilds. And terrorist groups were set up called Irgun, the Stern Gang, Haganah. And the people running these groups later became prime ministers of Israel, and then condemned terrorism. And these terrorist groups were absolutely everything that you perceive as terrorist groups to be now, killing the innocent, bombing buildings and all the rest of it. And as a result of this, at least 800,000 Palestinians had to leave their own land and go into exile. There's apparently 4 million of their successors are now alive in different countries in the Middle East. And the State of Israel was declared in 1948, and of course the European governments and the American governments immediately recognized it. And at that time, it represented a certain amount of land in Israel, but, and this is not me surmising, this is provable fact from their own documents and their own quotations. Those that were running Israel, in other words, running it on behalf of the Rothschilds, were not going to settle for what they'd got then. The idea was to continually battle with, undermine, marginalize, terrorize the Palestinian population. I'm not saying that this is what all Jewish people in Israel were going to do. Of course not. I'm talking about the elite that controls Israel, just as the elite that controls America and Britain doesn't represent the thoughts and beliefs and desires of the American or British people. I'm talking about the elite, not the people in general.
Because the people in general don't have any idea that this is really going on, do they? Exactly they don't, because they're obviously given a false history in the schools and everything, and they're indoctrinated just like any other country. But there are some fantastic young Jewish people in Israel who during this slaughter have been vociferously speaking out, have refused to join the military, the compulsory draft, and have ended up in jail as a result, but said that's better than going and killing people I have no argument with. And what's happened is that over this period of time, since 1948, wars have been triggered. Okay, punch me, okay? I don't want to punch me. I'm going to make life difficult until you punch me, okay? Hey, do you see that? He punched me. Okay, send the boys in. That's how it works. And what has happened is progressively more and more of the land has been taken over by the Israeli government. And even places like the West Bank, which are actually specified Palestinian lands, vast numbers of Israeli settlers have settled there and taken control of the place. And the other land now that is left to the Palestinians is the Gaza Strip, which is a piece of bleak, dead desert, which is the most populated piece of land on the face of the earth. And that's what these lunatics were dropping bombs into. And then they say, we're not targeting civilians. Well, you're dropping bombs where 1.5 million civilians live in a tiny piece of land. Do you think you might hurt some of them? And so what we have is in Gaza is and I don't use this word lightly, it's a concentration camp for 1.5 million people, where the Israeli government control what goes in, what goes out,
who goes in and who goes out. And the reason that they banned the UN representative to look after the interests of the Palestinians, the reason they banned him from going into Gaza just in December and threw him out of the country was because they knew this was coming, and they didn't want him there to report the truth. That's why they banned journalists from going in. And journalists who've gone in there since have been horrified at what they've seen. We say that what happened in Nazi Germany could not happen again. We have just watched it, and it goes on daily, the undermining of that population. And because they've been demonized, they're just Palestinians, they're all terrorists, kill them all. That's what some of the Jewish leaders have said, by the way. Direct quote. Because of that, we are witnessing genocide, literally, because that's the idea. These sick people answering to the Rothschilds, they want no Palestinians in that area. They want the Israeli government to control everything, what they call the Greater Israel, and they're moving towards it by the day.
Now, David, what do we do as, ordinary common people in our everyday lives, those of us who struggle with the financial markets and worry about paying our bills and really just have to, keep our whole selves just kind of grounded in our own little worlds? Because that's really the reality for the majority of people listening, is that, with the financial circumstances going on in the world, and they need the hope because they feel like they can't get through every day. And, what do they do about something that seems so far away from them, when they seem to, has that all been, manipulated too, so that we kind of stay in our own little circles and worry about paying, the utility bills and rent?
Well, that's precisely. I've seen documents, got copies of them at home, where they actually say all this. One of the lines in one of the documents is about the population. Keep them busy, 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 back on the farm with the other animals. In other words, keep them so focused on survival, getting through another month, paying the bills and doing all these things, that they don't lift their head up and actually, A, see what's going on, and B, feel that they have the time to do anything about it, given that they have to survive another month. That's all part of the plan. You see, when you've got a handful of people, relatively a handful of people, that's what it is, in the full knowledge of this, trying to control the lives of more than 6 billion, two things have to happen. You have to divert the attention of the 6 billion into something, i.e. survival, so that they are focused on that and not what you're doing. And B, you have to get that 6 billion to police each other. And that's what they do. They create fault lines of divide and rule through society, through religions, through income brackets, through race, and all the rest of it. And they play them off against each other. So while we're fighting each other and cussing each other and blaming each other and focused on just surviving another month financially or whatever, they just do whatever they like, because we're looking the other way. Well, most people are looking the other way. And, this is such a big topic because, when I started on this journey 20 years ago consciously, I started in the first few years to uncover what I call the 5 sense level of this, exactly what we're talking about today. And then I went through and I started uncovering the interdimensional level of this, where there are other realms of reality that interpenetrate this one and can manipulate this one in various ways. And then I went through that to my real focus today, which is the nature of reality, which that's where the keys lie. This world is a virtual reality game, and when you put it together, I use the game in terms of symbolism, but it's a virtual reality universe, and we are manipulated. This is the whole bottom line of it, to identify with the vehicle that we use, our consciousness uses to experience this virtual reality universe, i.e. the body. So we look in the mirror and we say, that's me. I'm David Icke. I'm Joe Bloggs, Charlie Smith. And what that does, immediately you identify who you are with that. It brings you down to the limitation or the perceived limitations of this reality. You enter I can't, I could never, I'm powerless world of manipulated reality because of the false self-identity you've taken on. And that will, because of the software programs running through the body computer, that's what it is. It's a biological computer of incredible advancement, but it's still a biological computer. And by biological, I mean it's not like the computer on the desk where it's programmed to react to input, and when you put the data in, it reacts to it as it's programmed to do. The biological computer, and they're starting to develop them now in some of the universities around the world, has the ability not just to react to data as programmed, but to assess that data and make decisions on it. What do we call that? We call that thinking. And that's why thinking and knowing, thinking and intuitive knowing are not the same thing, because thought is the realm of the body computer. So this computer has software programs running through it, and one of them is what psychologists call a fight or flight response, which is a program running through, I think it's the reptilian brain at the back of the brain, the oldest part of the human brain. Now, on one level, this is important because it's that survival mechanism programmed into the computer that keeps us alive for a long time. Imagine if you didn't have a survival response, the body didn't have a survival response. I mean, you'd be doing things, you wouldn't last very long. But what's happened is these people have who understand all this, they just want to keep this information I'm talking about now from us. I'm talking about the Obamas and the Bushes. I mean, the real McCoy in the background. Beyond anyone you see in the public arena, they understand how this works. And so what they've done is targeted the survival response mechanisms by constantly bombarding us with things to be fearful about and frightened of not surviving about. And what that does, it locks us in, if we fall for it, into that part of the body computer's software, which is about survival. And once you're in fear of not surviving, then you will start to give your power away big time to anyone you think will help you survive. This is why doctors and the ludicrous medical profession, which has not a clue what the body is, never mind how it works, that's why they have so much power. It's because people say, save me. And this is why governments have so much power. Save me. That's why Barack Obama is going to be given so much power by the people in the next little while, because it saved me. It's all these survival mechanisms that run through. Now, this is the vehicle. And if we identify with it, then it plays us. It lives us. We don't live through it. It lives us. And we take on its perceptions. We take on its sense of limitation. We take on its fears and its terror of not surviving. When you become conscious, when you stop identifying with the reflection in the mirror, and you recognize at a deep level that is the vehicle that I'm using to experience this level. David Icke is not me. It's an experience that my consciousness is having. And once you get to that point of consciousness, which is a state of awareness that makes mind, thought, intellect look like the village idiot, then you can start symbolically standing on the top of the hill and looking down and seeing the big picture rather than being caught in the myopia of this reality. Now, from the perspective of consciousness, that which goes on after the body computer finishes its cycle, that which comes in to experience this reality through the body computer, that does not have any connection to survival or fear at all, because it understands that it is all that is, has been, ever will be. It is eternal consciousness, all possibility. It cannot do anything but survive. It's not possible to do anything else. Now, once you get to that point, you start to override the computer programs running through the body computer, which are about fear of not surviving, fear of not having this, fear of not having that. And what's kind of amazing when you do that, when you let that fear go, is the experiences that bring about that fear, they start to dissipate often. Because you're now overriding the program. Instead of the program playing out, thinking about having not enough, scarcity, it understands that, there is no scarcity except that which is created, because this is a virtual reality game. Does a virtual reality game have scarcity? No, you just program in some more abundance, and there it is, because that's how it works. You cannot have scarcity in the infinite realm of consciousness that we experience. You can't. You can manufacture it and give the illusion of it. And what happens is they create scarcity to create fear, to create divide and rule, to create competition so that they have what they want or need by screwing and walking all over this group, instead of saying, hey, there's enough for everybody. There's no need to panic. There's no need to fight each other. There's enough for everybody. Just to share it out. All these things come when you become conscious, but when you're stuck in the body-computer's level of reality, which is about division, it's about fear, it's about desperation to survive, then you fall into the realm that these manipulators operate in. And that's the idea. That is the key. The idea is to so manipulate this reality that the experiences that we have and the programming we have when we come into this world, where our parents, not through malevolence, but through their own programming, pass their programming onto you, that it pulls you out of an awareness of consciousness that you are into the body-computer level of perception. And that's the level that they control and manipulate. So once you fall into it, you're falling into their web. When you open your mind and allow consciousness in, then you can start unraveling their web, because they themselves are also in a tiny box of awareness.
David, do you think that is the healing process? I mean, do you think that it's part of each person going through their own healing process? Because don't you think that it's, in a way, our consciousness has been wounded because of this, and so therefore, pursuing higher consciousness really means going into some kind of healing process. What do you and I've also heard you talk about, we only have about 5 minutes left of the show, but I know this is a rather big question, but how, the healing, even the healing New Age movement itself is, in fact, manipulated as well. So do you have a few closing thoughts on, how it's needed? I personally believe that healing is needed in order for us to access higher consciousness. But how do you not get caught in, the manipulative avenues of that movement?
Well, you do. I look at the New Age movement, as it's called, and I don't see consciousness, except in some individuals. I see mind. People talk about my mind, your mind, his mind, her mind. I don't see it like that at all after 20 years of research and the areas that my life has taken me into now. I see the mind. I see one mind, and it's a digital construct on one level to which the body computers are connected. So the New Age mind, if you like, is the same mind as the Henry Kissinger mind. It's just a different aspect and expression of it. It's still mind. And mind thinks in terms of past, present, and future, limitation, and all the rest of it. And what they've done with the New Age, I call the New Age the last cul-de-sac before the gold mine, because they have to have what I call designer manipulation for those that break out of the mass of a pack and won't buy the for everyone manipulation. So you have to find designer manipulation to stop them actually getting out of the trap. And the New Age is that. It talks about vibrations and different frequencies and different dimensions, all of which I agree with, but then it goes round and round and round and round and round. Someone I thought brilliantly described at least the extreme of the New Age as they're circling the airport in a holding pattern, refusing to land. And so we need to look at our perceptions. Are they based on past, present, and future? Are they based on limitation? Are they based on hierarchy? Because any hierarchical structure is mind. Consciousness doesn't do hierarchy. By the way, consciousness doesn't get wounded. Consciousness is all it is, has it ever been, ever will be. It is all possibility. You don't wound all possibility. What you wound is the mind. the mind aspect. And we have to have, all of us, we have to be in mind to a certain extent. Otherwise, we can't be here. We come in and interact with this reality on the mind level, through the brain, through the left brain, to what we call the intellect. The question is not, are we in mind to a point? We all are. We have to be. How much does mind dominate our perception, and how much does consciousness on the top of the hill dominate our perception? And with a vast number of humans, because of the manipulation and the constant underpinning of it daily, minute by minute, most people are stuck in mind, not consciousness. And the awakening is to awaken to consciousness. And this is why we talk about opening your mind. Yes. Yeah. Opening your mind to allow consciousness in, and then your perceptions change and your life changes. And you know instinctively, without anyone telling you, what you need to do to make a contribution to what's happening now.
I think that's really brilliant, and I thank you for, coming on again. It's been a pleasure having you back to talk about some of the issues that we're all facing on some level. And in closing the show today, in closing thoughts, what do you have going on currently? Are you coming out with any new books? Are you having any? Where are you? What's going on with you? Well,
yeah, actually, I'm working on a new book now, which is all about this last stuff, the nature of reality, going into it in great detail. I mean, it's really pushing the cutting edge forward when it comes out, because of what I'm coming across now. But I'm talking in Los Angeles at the Life Consciousness Conscious Life conference and exhibition in Los Angeles over the weekend of the 14th to the 16th. On the 16th, which is the Monday, I'm doing my mega 7-hour talk from 4 till 11, and I'll be connecting the dots across the great swathe of subjects we've been talking about, and many more, especially the nature of reality, because that's where the key lies, to open the door to remember. That's all it is. Remember who we really are.
Yeah, that's the Conscious Life Expo in LAX Hilton in Los Angeles. And if you would like more information about that expo, there's a link on my website. I will also be in Los Angeles at the same time at the same expo. So I hope to see your grand 7-hour talk. I have seen it before, and it's something not to miss. David, thank you so much for joining me.
It's moved on since you last saw it. It moves on all the time.
Mount Shasta.
Yeah, it moves on all the time, massively, all the time.
Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure. Good luck with your new book, and I look forward to its release. Is it coming out this year?
End of this year, early next year. I want to get it absolutely right, because it's amazing stuff.